listening to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. This is our debut episode. And
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, what are we doing?
Almost
We're just another podcast.
just another
podcast.
Utah politics podcast with
Everybody's
conservative
doing
women. Everyone's doing them.
Everybody's doing them.
Yeah.
So why do people want to watch ours? I mean, really, why are we going to be the best podcast that you're not going to want to miss?
Yeah, I got to tell you, we have a unique view of everything, right? Like what's out there. I do feel like a lot of what's out there often is comes from one perspective that is different probably from our perspective. And we also have some ideas about what goes on behind the scenes and a little bit of know-how about how things work.
Okay, let's just clear something up right here.
Yeah.
We are not a show for women about women.
No, we're a show for everybody about everything. We just happen to be women.
Happen to be women. But yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. Carolyn, what's your background, and what do you bring to this?
Yeah, I don't know what I bring to the table, but and my kids would ask that same question, right?
Oh,
What
my
do you
gosh.
bring to the table, mother? But hopefully dinner. No, I'm just kidding.
Carolyn's awesome. Okay, because I'll introduce you. But tell us what you're doing.
No, okay,
tell us.
so-
Maybe how do we know each other? How did we come together?
Yeah.
And
So Kim and I, when Kim was a Utah legislator, I was working for Speaker Hughes at that time, and we got to know each other, worked together at the House for a number of years. And
mostly we'd sit in the back of caucus going,
there were good things.
frustrated about the same things, excited about the same things. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's
found out
true.
we're pretty close and
Yeah, we
wavelength.
align, yes.
Yeah.
And then I recently left working for Senator Mike Lee, another one of those guys you just have to
Best
support.
senator ever.
Best senator ever.
Best senator ever.
And have started running a new business coalition called Freedom Front of Utah that was put together by a number of business people who felt like
Like we needed another Silicon Slopes in Salt Lake Chamber?
who felt like they were not really represented in policy very well in the state.
Or by the Salt Lake Chamber?
Yeah. And so, no, we would, yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to gloss right over that right now. But we have our own way of doing things and our own perspective on things. Our board really is a lot of kind of libertarian-leaning conservatives, maybe some conservative-leaning libertarians. And we bring it all together and I just started this new organization that I'm running. So, Kim, since you left the Utah legislature, you had a run for Congress.
I won the first election. That's how I like to say it.
Nice.
I lost the second, but I won the first. The best one, but now we're represented by Burgess Owens, and that's fine too.
Yes. So, you have a good member of Congress there. So tell us what you're doing right now, too.
So I am still continuing in my pre-legislative life, and then even while I served in the legislature, working on education choice, school choice. So I'm a 15, 16, 17-year charter school founder, but now I'm running Utah's first tax credit scholarship for students with disabilities, and that's super fun because not only does it give a scholarship for students with disabilities to attend private school, also it provides funding for homeschoolers as well. But it offers a state income tax credit, a 1-to-1 match. So really people get to choose not just the education side, but how they want to support education
And
as
that's
well.
confusing for a lot of people, too, right? Like, this is not a write-off.
No, not a
this
write-off.
is a 100% credit. So every dollar that you would be giving to the state in state tax can go to your scholarship fund dollar for dollar.
We give you a certificate to write it all off.
Because people have asked me that, too, as I've told them, well, how do, what happens when I go to file my taxes? Oh, no.
Yep.
They give you, and I have one for a small amount. I had no idea what my tax liability would be. I knew what mine would be. I didn't know what my husband's would be. So I gave you a little bit of money and got my
thanks for that.
certificate. So thank you.
Yeah, so still working on school choice.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, so we wanted to come to you again and talk about some of the issues of the day, current events. In particular, we want to concentrate more on local issues like the state legislature, like your city councils, what's going on in school boards. We've felt like there's a lot of people out there talking about national issues.
Yeah, always.
But we wanted to offer a different perspective and a different place to go to for information. Because when's the last time you went to the Salt Lake Tribune to get news that you trust?
That you trust. And I think that's the key. Two points I want to make based on what you just said. One of those being people don't know what they can trust and where to get news. I would say, of course you can trust us.
Well, of course. I mean,
but
facts.
Well,
Straight
I
talk
care.
facts.
I think both of us care about truth, right? And it will always come from our perspective, but I care about the facts. I care about what I say and what I believe being vetted, right? In fact, it was funny. Years ago, I had a friend who came over to my house. There was the Salt Lake Tribune on the driveway. I mean, this was like 15 years ago, maybe, I don't know, 12, 13. I stopped subscribing to them not long after that because they started getting pretty radical, and I now subscribe again. But anyway, but she picked up my Tribune and she walked in the house. She said, "You seriously read this?" Knowing that I was a strong conservative, I said, of course I read that. And I read the New York Times and I read the Washington Post. I stopped that about 2 years ago. But, I think it's good for us to have a broad range of ideas. And that's how we vet the truth. If we shut down anything that doesn't, align with our personal philosophy, it really is hard to ever get to a place of honesty and truth.
So recently, it's actually December 6th, Tim Pool's podcast, Timcast, if any of you watch that, he brought out some research that shows it is no secret that mainstream media is left-leaning. But that's all that conservatives really have to consume.
Yeah.
So what's in front of us is that left-leaning, but then some of us go search out truth in more conservative areas, and turns out that really conservatives do have a more broad base of news they consume, even though they may adopt one side, but for the left they don't go looking for conservative information. So we do tend to have much more broad base and broader perspective access and information that we consume. So so we do come from like you said, a conservative perspective, and but we're going to talk about local stuff.
Yeah. And I think that, we've seen the sausage be made, right? Both of us have seen that. Both of us work in a realm where we're still in the middle of that, at least sometimes.
Right.
Or at least to a degree. And I think that that's something more and more people are caring about understanding as they see things kind of spiral out of control in a lot of ways, move beyond a place where they feel comfortable and realize that it's time for them to start getting involved. The kind of the luxury of living a cloistered existence within our family and home and neighborhood, I think that's come to an end. Many people had that for decades, and those days are just gone because of some of the moves that we're seeing to force down certain ideologies and actions and discriminatory actions, and then to shut down any debate or discussion. And I think we're all realizing it's time to be active and motivated. And so, or we are being motivated and realizing it's time to be active. And so I think people are looking for a place where they can get that information and know how things do operate and how they can be effective.
That's right. Okay, so find us where you find your favorite podcasts. We're Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. Subscribe, follow us in social media as we start to roll this out. We've got some great content coming up today. We've got Representative Walt Brooks, and later in the week we're going to have Representative Kira
Next week.
Kira Birkeland, Ken Ivory, Representative Ivory. So we have a long list we're going to be covering this session over the next couple weeks extensively. So here's where you need to come to get your information. It's not going to be in the Tribune, and it's not going to be Brian Schott. And you're going to come to us to get some straight talk and learn some behind the scenes and have some upfront with some of our legislators over the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
So introduce our guests.
Yes, so we have Representative Walt Brooks, who will be joining us to talk about his anti-COVID vaccine passport or anti-vaccine passport bill, HB060, and the efforts that he's making in the House for that. So we're happy that you could join us, Representative Brooks, and tell us a little bit about the bill that you've been working on. Maybe some potential changes to it that are coming down the pike.
Are we talking about COVID again? Because I'm really starting to get fatigued on everything COVID.
But here's the thing. We're living with it, man. We're living with it. So
do we really have to keep talking about this? Because, the first week of the session wasn't that enough? Didn't we take care of everything?
Yeah, I wish you guys had saved us from all abuse and overreach related to COVID the first week of the session, Representative Brooks, but you didn't. So we're back again.
Tell us first, remind us what what area you represent, what House seat you have, and if that's changing.
I represent the last seat, District 75, down in the corner. So I represent St. George and up Highway 18, if you're familiar with that, with Winchester, Diamond, Pine Valley, Enterprise, Gunlock. So I have a little bit of downtown St. George and a lot of rural as well. So.
Okay, great. And what session is this for you? What number?
This will be the 6th.
Okay.
Yep.
So you are fairly experienced up there on the Hill.
Well, I guess maybe a little bit of my green is worn off, maybe. Yeah.
We're glad to have you. Okay, so tell us about HB060 and maybe some of the challenges that it's facing and some of your ideas about, things that you can do with it.
You bet. So the whole genesis of it was listening to all the comments about our wonderful healthcare workers and how they were heroes. We saw signs everywhere over the overpasses, on brick walls, and then all of a sudden they're the demons because they weren't vaccinated. I couldn't put that together. How did these people are saving us and working all these extra hours, and now if they chose not to get a vaccine, now they're the problem and they're going to be terminated. They're going to lose their job. And it just did not sit right. And so we started coming up with this idea of how can we protect our personal health information. So what I do for work is kind of around that world of HIPAA and private health information. And it just seemed like that P became silent. It became health information now. And everybody wanted to know what you were and be able to judge you. And basically we created this new kind of discriminatory class, like you're bad and I'm virtuous because I went and got a shot. And even though I chose to get vaccinated, it was actually a really hard decision for me to do that, but I chose to do it for my own reasons. But it's no one else's business what I do with my health, especially when the fact is that it doesn't matter if you get vaccinated or not, you can still get other people sick. So what's the purpose? If you can get someone sick being vaccinated and the other person is not vaccinated and we call him the demon, there's no reason to it. So I went and talked to a lot of people and we figured out, we got to do something. We didn't ask about people's health information ever, can you imagine back in the 90s if we said, hey, we need to be proof that you don't have AIDS or you don't have hepatitis or we would have a fight on our hands because that's their personal health information based off of their diseases that they have. Right. And I've heard all the reasons, but so I started looking around, and what I've learned is if another state has something similar, it's a great place to start because it's been vetted to death. And so this bill or something similar to it has already been passed in 7 different states. And the one that I thought was the most appropriate was the one in Montana. And so we took that as a baseline to build off and make sure that it fit Utah. And it was basically a vaccine passport ban. And that was my goal, because in addition to seeing these healthcare workers having to require you to show your ID everywhere you go, and that's what a vaccine passport is, right? That this is me and this is my status in a grocery store, go get ice cream, go to movies. It's kind of like, do you remember Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Colonel Sergeant Stoltz. He's like, "Where are your papers?" That's what it kind of felt like to me. And I'm like, "This is not us. We don't do that." Yeah. And so we kind of developed off HB060, which was Montana's bill, and build it up. And I think we addressed a lot of issues with carve-outs, such as the medical industry, where they have sensitive issues, and so they can ask questions, but you still don't have to volunteer.
Okay, so that was your impetus, though. So what happens to those hospital workers, medical care workers that first inspired you to run the bill? What happens with them?
So it's basically, now that it's a protective class, and we'll talk about that more because we did make a little bit of a change, but it's the same result, is you can't discriminate someone because of their health or their vaccine or immunity status. And so healthcare workers, they can't lose their job because of they're not vaccinated. That's just the bottom line. Okay. But it does allow the hospitals to make reasonable accommodations without being punitive. So let's say if you're in the surgical unit or you're in the baby ICU, and they're like, well, this is something that's really important here, they may move you to a different area that's a lateral move, but you have some rights there. So people aren't just going to lose their job. So that's the healthcare worker. In the other carve-out is schools. We know that schools require vaccines, but we passed this portion of the bill last special session that allowed you to say, I don't want to answer. So we kind of, I get a lot of questions, and some of them read into this bill really interesting things. And just because it's not right there, they don't realize that it's not already addressed, such as a school asking, but we already passed another section of code that allows you that personal health information to say refuse to answer. So we can go into some of those interesting that maybe answer some people's questions, but that's, I think, Kim, that answered your question.
Yeah. So what is, you seeing pushback on this?
Well, I think that initially Republicans in general, we don't like to tell business what to do, right? We want them to be able to operate freely. And I tend to agree with that. But where do you balance it? Where do you say, well, business, since you're a business, you have more rights than an individual? You know, it's kind of like that local control issue. Who's the most local? You are as an individual. And so, you know, we already step into this space a little bit as Americans, because I think in America, we believe that all men are created equal and should be discriminated against, whether it's your religion or your ethnicity or your skin color or whatever. We want to treat people the same, especially in what they call public accommodation, where you engage in commerce, like the grocery store and the movies and stuff. And I can't think of something more personal than your health or your immunity status. And I've heard all kinds of things like, well, we got to do something because we can get everybody sick, or what about me because I'm immune compromised and I'll get sick. I'm like, well, you can't go anyway because you have a vaccine. So, you know, we had to look through this and say, where are we at? Did we have this problem before? Right. And one of the representatives, who I don't think is in favor of this bill, she brought something up and says, we need to make policy kind of back before we had the pandemic, because we kind of were on a logical playing field. Well, 5 years ago, did we want to know everybody's vaccination status?
That's right.
Was that an important critical issue? It wasn't.
Right.
And we knew people had hepatitis. We knew people had AIDS. We knew people had meningitis, which is extremely contagious if you have small kids. I went through that because a family member had meningitis and I had infants, and it was a pretty touching thing because not a good deal. So you just kind of have to take some risk in your responsibility to have the freedoms that we enjoy. So
can we? Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that the reason I think this is appropriate is this is not black and white. There's a lot of gray here, and I recognize that. But that's what's great about our republic. We have elected officials that supposedly are our voice, the people's voice, and they get to draw that line in that kind of gray area. And if it goes too far, we can move it back or move it forward. And I think that's what we're doing with this. We never had to deal with this before because it was understood. But now it's getting kind of gray where people are saying, well, I want to know your health status for my own benefit. And we have to redraw that line so it's clear.
Can we just say creeper? Okay. So sometimes we cling to phrases and ideals that are out of context. Okay, so you brought this up that some people are saying, we don't want more government intrusion on business. That is so misguided. It's so incredibly misguided. So, I mean, first of all, commerce law is always and has always been subordinate to individual rights. Commerce rights are secondary and subordinate to individual rights. No business wrote the Constitution. People did. And of the people, by the people, for the people. But a primary role, and by the way, I can disclaim, I mean, I was up there with you, for 6 years, and every year I was named as, one of the top people when it comes to deregulation and more business freedom against government regulation. So I'm there too. But a primary role of the government in the prime directive of government is to protect my civil rights, to protect my constitutional rights. Anybody out there who is saying, we don't like this bill because it's government inside of a business, wrong. It is government getting between you and someone who wants to remove your rights and infringe on your rights. And I know there's some groups out there, I know one in particular, that business is the God, and so any effort to regulate is the demon. But they forget that the role of government is to protect my rights. And
you're right. There's the one group that's kind of freedom based is what they proclaim, and I think most of the time they do a great job of that. They're saying, well, we don't want to tell businesses what to do. I says, great, but what about the other hand? What about the individual?
That's right.
We can't rule business over the individual. And one reason it really made me say, you know what, I have to be on this other side with the individual because I'm seeing a trend in the country. And that is big business is ruling our policy.
Yep.
Big business is the tool of the left. Like you see it with Google, you're seeing it with Facebook, you're seeing it with like Coke and Walmart. These guys are implement policies of the left. And I didn't elect the NBA. I didn't elect Walmart to tell me if I need to show my ID everywhere I go in Utah. And I think we need to be careful that sometimes those that are really trying to push for more power, they're utilizing some tools that we claim to be, holy, that we won't touch against us. Yeah. And I love business. Business creates wealth. The government does not. So I want them to have all the freedom they can do. But when they start impeding on what I believe is our civil rights, just like you articulated, Kim, that we have to do something. And, I ran a few bills before that I thought were, kind of constitutional friendly and freedom loving. But this bill has got so much positive feedback because people are feeling it. They know somebody that's almost lost their job or was threatened with their job and the stress their family went through. And something that people are not addressing either is what group is the highest unvaccinated group that we have in Utah? It's our minorities.
Yes.
Right.
And so we're going to discriminate against this group that needs to get a job, that doesn't trust the government because their own experience they've had in the past. I said, this is not just a Republican thing. This is really a civil rights issue. It doesn't matter where you're at on the spectrum. Yeah. We should not discriminate against people, period.
Right.
Well, one thing you didn't mention that we don't need to take a big detour on this, but not only do we all know somebody who's been in trouble with their job, but we all now know somebody who's been significantly injured. And so it is a very rational place for people to not want to be coerced into that decision. Do I put bread on the table or do I risk not being able to put bread on the table? So, and that maybe is for another day, but we need to just stress that the individual rights, it's not the government regulating the business, it is the government saying, no, business, you don't get to hurt these people.
Well, and I've had some conversations lately around this issue, and with the new organization that I'm running, Freedom Front, we had to really think through some of these ideas because there has been a move in this state. We have kind of woke leftist policies or we have libertarian policies, it seems, and there aren't a lot of people articulating conservative policies. And that is, there is a role for government.
Limited.
Limited, but there is a role. We don't believe in the far libertarian. I don't.
We're not
I don't think you
anarchists.
do. I am not an anarchist. I am not interested in a society where every person can do whatever they want. And we formed government in this country for a reason, right? There's a purpose for government.
Strong fences make good neighbors.
Great neighbors. And it comes down to this idea of protecting civil liberties. And I think we've often also got lost in the argument that it only protects us, government should only protect us from infringement on our civil liberties that come from itself. Well, that doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, certainly government should not violate our inalienable rights, but nor should our fellow man. We do not allow consenting adults to enter into a contract for slavery or for all kinds of, I could go down a little bit of a list here, but for all kinds of other business arrangements. We don't allow it, and there's a reason. Because we have to protect the rights of the individual. And if we feel like there's a violation in that contract, a blatant violation of individual liberties, we don't allow it to take place. And I'll tell you, I've asked a number of people and I've never had anybody come up with a reasonable response to this. And that is, well, before I get to that, I want to make one comment, Representative Brooks, on what you said about, we've never allowed anybody to ask for our
Private
health
medical
status,
health,
private medical records in order to do business with us, right? And just prior to COVID, so I'm originally from New York, just prior to COVID, New York passed a law where they decriminalized somebody who knowingly infects another person with AIDS. Just before COVID. This was in months before COVID hit. They decriminalized knowingly infecting another person with AIDS through sexual contact. But they would criminalize the potential that you may infect somebody, right? Or allow private businesses.
In a restaurant, 5 feet before
right?
you sit down.
So we are so backwards. But I've asked a number of people this question, and I want to pose it again, and that is, if we can allow this, tell me what powers tell me what abuses we haven't allowed to happen, or what powers we haven't given to private actors that couldn't allow them to say, we're living in a climate emergency. You cannot shop in our store, get contracts with our entity, do any business with us.
Some believe this is a precursor to that.
Oh, it is. If you, after showing us your medical records, have more than 2 live births, if you have more than 2 children, it's over. We will not do business with you. What have we not, what's missing? Do they lack any power if we allow this to happen? Do they lack any power to do that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. This is a step, and people have told me, why are you doing this? There's not going to be any passports, and that's not happening. And I'm like, right now, I meet with people every day, groups and organizations. In LA, if you don't have a passport, you don't shop. You don't go to the ice cream store. You don't go to the movies. It's already happening in LA, Chicago, and New York. Mm-hmm. And you talk about what else is dangerous. That's what they're saying. Like, well, if you're not vaccinated, you're dangerous. You're dangerous to people. What about me? What about me? And I'm like, well, if I'm vaccinated, I'm still dangerous because you can still get sick. So what's more dangerous? And guess what? You hear all the news. We got to pull this Facebook post off because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
Your opinion.
It's dangerous, yeah.
Back in 2020, when we were having special sessions dealing with COVID, when we didn't always know everything yet, but there was an effort to to create a database for vaccinations. And I remember saying, don't create the database, because once you have a database, once you have a structure, then it can be used against you. Well, I was crazy, for being so
Paranoid.
sensitive about that and paranoid. But I'll tell you what, this has been the 2 years of slippery slope as a thing. So if you can identify a slippery slope, we're sliding, and just about everything that people have been afraid could go overboard, we've ended up there. But yeah, absolutely. We had that discussion on the Hill, and people were saying, no, nobody's ever going to require vaccinations. But this is just to help parents with their chickenpox records. And I'm like, no, we're in the middle of a pandemic. If you think that this is not going to be used against the people, if you don't create the database, it can't be used against you.
Yeah.
But
And information's so easy now to consolidate, to use, to track. It's a big slippery slope, a very steep
Very
one.
steep.
Very
Yeah.
steep. Okay, so Representative
Well,
Brooks. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say is one thing that I've noticed, because before I got into this position, I wasn't really that politically involved. My political involvement was yelling at the TV. That was about my political involvement. But one thing I noticed is I always felt like Republicans, for a win, was only receding away from their principles a little bit. That was a win. I'm like, we always just take this little teeny step back because they want to take a huge step back, but we fought and we only lost a little. And I'm like, when are we going to say, no, this is where it belongs, and take a step forward? And that's what I kind of feel like this is doing. It's saying, like, listen, we're already 6 feet behind it. We need to get back to the line and say, this is our principle. This is where it stands. It allows freedom for individuals, and it still allows a myriad of things for businesses to do. They still can do a million things to protect their people without getting that personal.
so what have you found on the legal front? I know in California, there's an attorney I'm following a little bit named John Howard. He's representing a lot of employees in California against mandates. And kind of interesting what's going on in the courts, because a lot of people think, and I'm one of them, that isn't this already covered? I know it's not covered in HIPAA. HIPAA's the medical arena, but surely I already have a civil right to not be questioned about my health status on things. You can't ask me. I mean, any HR training starts with, you can't ask somebody, do you plan to get pregnant this year? Do you have cancer? Are you healthy? That already exists. So when you say getting back to some original standard that existed before the pandemic, but for fear we've thrown stuff out the window. But what have you heard is going on the legal challenge of, why do we even have to have your bill? Honestly, why do we have to have your bill?
Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of conspiracy theory answers out there, like control and power and stuff, which might have a lot of legitimacy to them. I don't know, but that's what it feels like to me. When you talk about different avenues, like this is underneath the discrimination code, which is very clear and very articulated. We looked at trying to get away from the protected class and still have some teeth behind it. So we're like, what if we made it $1,000 fine through OSHA or Business and Labor or whatever? That's where our legal counsel, and Kim, both of you know, John Fellows is amazing. I mean, he knows this stuff upstairs and downstairs, and the draft attorney on this is also really, really, really good. That just muddies the water, because can you imagine if you get a criminal violation against you, and then you go to court, and let's say you're in the lovely town of Salt Lake, and the prosecutor won't prosecute. And then and even if you're in an area that will prosecute, you got to come up with the attorney fees. It is really laborious. It's a lot of problem where this discrimination part of the code is clear, that you just don't do these things. And I think like Kim, what you said, I really like that. We don't ask if you have cancer. Could you imagine we discriminate against some of that if they had cancer? Yeah. And now they're done. Boy, there's a lawsuit and a half because it's discriminating. Right. And so I think this is just as important in that same arena.
Okay.
Where's the bill? Where's the bill now?
The bills and rules. And we just got to work. I think because we're changing some language, we got to get the language finished and drafted. Our attorneys are working crazy on it, try to get it done. So it should be ready in the next day or two, and hopefully that will be ready to come out.
Any signal from the governor, from leadership, where they are? Senate?
Well,
Actually, I
we
don't care
have-
about Senate because the Senate's not going to pass it is always sort of a lame tactic that the House uses to say to stall things and vice versa. But where do you think
we
it
have,
is?
We have 31 co-sponsors in the House.
Wow. Okay.
Congratulations.
I think
Good work.
there are people who are concerned about that protected class. That's why we're really putting a lot of energy to figure out how, because some big businesses, they know that protected class issue, and because they have deep pockets, some people, they cheat the system. We all know that. They're the ambulance chaser kind of thing. They get an attorney behind them and they go after the pockets. So we want to make sure that this is a good policy. The governor, I think he's sincere in the fact that he's sick of COVID. He's sick of all this stuff. But he also doesn't like divisive bills. And we've all seen them. They really kind of pit the left against the right, and they go out there and we cause a lot of upheaval. And I'm not that guy. I don't like to get in that world. If it's not reaching on both sides a little bit, then it's not probably right. And that's why I'm going to go meet with the Democrat caucus on Thursday and really talk about this minority group, because they're a lot of the people that are contacting me.
Right.
I think we need this wristbands from all aspects, all income levels, the importance of their personal civil rights. So I'm hoping the governor will see that this is a good policy, that we're not trying to create a new class, a new problem, a new whatever, that's going to have potential unseen problems down the road. But it's really kind of establishing what we've already done for decades in this country and had great success at decades of trusting people and taking responsibility for yourself. And I have empathy for those people that come to testify and say, well, I'm sick and I'm this and that, I can't go out. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. So you want everyone to lock down so you can? Or like my dad, he's 82 years old. When we had the flu in the house, remember the flu? We don't talk about flu anymore. It's all deathly demon COVID stuff.
Cured.
But I would call him. I'd say, hey, Dad, just let you know, a couple of the kids have flu. And some days he'd come around, other days he's like, I don't care. What's the next stop, heaven? So, but it's just, it's a personal choice. And if you're afraid of that, I have neighbors. I live downtown St. George, where it's an older part of town. And I have some sweetest people you've ever met in your life. And one of them particularly is so scared to death, she will not answer her door for anybody. I mean, she is dying. I called the Department of Health back when COVID first started, because they wouldn't let families come to long-term care facilities because of the threat of COVID. And people were dying in the healthcare, not because of COVID, but because of COVID. They didn't have COVID. It was because nursing they just put their food in there, let them eat, but they have Parkinson's. So they can't eat. I just really believe that the way we treat the aged and the infant or preborn kind of indicates where we're at in our society. And it doesn't look good. We really need to figure out how we can address this. I think this bill is at least a start.
Excellent. Can I make one quick comment before we let you go? And that is, you talked about divisive bills. I would say that dividing people according to their health care decisions is divisive. Getting rid of their ability to exclude people from functioning in our society is uniting. So anyway, that's just my take on your bill.
That is a wonderful point, and I think we need to probably address that more in those that are higher than I am, because that is really the bottom line, is it? That really is.
Yep.
I think this is a unifying bill.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You bet.
We will keep this conversation going off the podcast and encourage people to reach out to their reps and those who are on relevant committees, including the Rules Committee, to get this bill out when you have that substitute ready to go. And hopefully the House will vote on it soon, or at least a committee will soon.
Can people follow you on social media?
Do they? Well, I'm not.
Can
really
they?
a social
Do you
media
have any?
person. Oh, sure.
Or website?
I have my personal one. I have quite a few followers there, but I do have a political one. I think there's 20 20, then follow me there.
Okay, we're going to get you
And
followers
remember,
because people are going to follow this bill.
They will follow
I live in
this
the
bill.
oldest part of the state, so most of my constituents are not what you call, Facebook savvy. So I try to be a little more one-on-one.
They're
that
on
way, but-
TikTok and Instagram, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so follow
Okay.
the bill.
Well,
What's
thanks,
the
you
bill
guys.
number again? Bill number?
HB60, which is
HB60.
easy to remember because the constitutional carry was HB60 last year.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us, Representative.
You bet.
Appreciate
You
your
guys have a
work.
great day.
Thanks, you too. So, thanks for joining us. We'll be back with another one of your legislators, elected representatives from the Utah legislature in a couple days. We also
Mostly the ones making trouble.
Yeah, well, good trouble.
Yeah.
There's plenty of trouble up there that I am not interested in. So, yes, and we want to thank Fosmu, our producer. Who
Say hi,
may-
Fosmu.
You're welcome.
Who may at some point disclose who he is and disclose his location. I understand there's a bill this session for extra security for Fosmo because of the work he's doing, and there may be a guardhouse and a gate being put up at
For
his studio.
$600,000.
$600,000 to protect him and us. But it's all worth it. Thank you, taxpayers.
And the
So-
sun can't hit his skin, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Thank you, Fosmu, for sacrificing potentially your life to do this important work.
Okay.
And please join us. Join us again. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Subscribe. Follow us on social media as we get things up and going. And we hope to see you again in a couple days. Thanks.